Test. Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. So just as if y'all can start making your way to a chair. I know this is limited, but wherever we can fit, we're just going to make it happen. So give us a few minutes and we'll start our presentation. Commission, our board of directors, I want to thank y'all for being here today. Today is a big day for all of us here today, and you're going to hear from a lot of different people something that participated in this marker and getting us to where we're at today. But the riot broke out in Pharr between the Mexican Americans, and at that time, Mexican Americans in Pharr did not really have a say-so in either politics, education, social events. All the protest was peaceful. It later turned violent. So today marks the 50th anniversary of the Pharr Riots, and we're so happy to be here today. I am going to turn it over to Michelle Lopez, our Chief Communications Officer. So please join us, Michelle.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning. Thank you all for being here on this Saturday morning. I want to Chief of Police, our Fire Chief, our commissioners, our assistant managers, all for being here, and all the other guests. It's an honor to be here. I am delighted to be here for a momentous occasion. And like Lisa said, some of us may remember, others may have been too small or weren't even born yet, but our families may have lived through it. If we all go back to February 6, 1971, a riot broke out in the city between Mexican American residents and the police. Like African Americans, Mexican Americans in Pharr had no say in either politics or social events Lisa mentioned. They experienced segregation by being forced to live on the North Railroad tracks, while the Anglos lived south of railroad in much better conditions. Racist conditions in the town also included a large economic gap, very little access to education, and experienced police brutality. That Saturday morning of February 6, 1971, hundreds of Pharr residents started a protest march against these conditions. And although it did start out peacefully, like Lisa mentioned, unfortunately, it ended in injuries and death. This historic marker we're unveiling today is to remind us what happened 50 years ago, but it also allows us to discuss with our children how much our city has progressed and is pressing. And the goal is not to move past what happened, but to move that conversation forward. So with that, I turn it over to our commissioner, Daniel Chavez, for his remarks.
Buenos días. First start by giving thanks to la familia Ramos por dejarnos estar aquí. Thank you for the family to allow us to be here today. Well, thank you for joining us today at this event, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the event that marked an era of zero unrest, racial discrimination, and a community finding is to challenge injustice. 50 years ago, a Mexican American like me would likely have had little chance of standing for you today as a leader and a commissioner in our community. 50 years ago, we were looked at differently, judged by the color of our skin, the language that we spoke, and the lower socioeconomic status that we were in. 50 years ago may seem like a long time ago, but the reality is racial discrimination still exists. What began as a peaceful riot was born out of frustration of racial discrimination, segregation, and biases toward Mexican Americans. As we have seen throughout history, sometimes things can grow out of control. What happened here in 1971 was a clash between a group of our residents and police force, which led to the death of a bystander, Alfonso Lodedo Flores. As the Pharr riot gained national media attention, what this did was bring about positive change in the city's government and structure. It tore open the reality that burdened the city's Mexican American population. And later that year, the citizens of Pharr elected the first Mexican American mayor. The unveiling of this historical marker is a means for us to remember our city's history. As painful as it may be, this mark will serve as a constant reminder to bear witness to the efforts of our predecessors who fought this, gave a voice to the voiceless, and created change in our community. Let us always remember the events of that fateful day. And let us keep in mind that even as much as our community has progressed, it remains all of our responsibility to keep it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. And now, on behalf of TechStop, we're going to have Pete Alvarez come up and say words.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. As a Pharr District engineer, it's our responsibility to maintain roads and highways. I say Pharr District because that's headquarters are right across the interstate here. You know, about 25 years ago, approximately, I was a summer student when the old Pharr office was there. Stanley Ramos, son of Mr. Ramos, from the shop. We were going down to do an inspection south of Pharr, and he told me, Pete, let me tell you a little story. This was a story. So here we are 25 years later from that to celebrate 50 years. I want to thank Mr. Garcia for initiating the process back in 2017 or so. I want to thank the Texas Historical Commission, which is our sister agency, for obviously coming up with the plaque. And then we at TxDOT installed it about a week ago. We wanted to make sure the concrete was all cured out for this momentous occasion. My role here is to actually do the dedication itself, but the unveiling will be done by the Ramos family. So at this time, thank you once again for coming out this morning, and I invite the Ramos family to say a few words.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you everybody for being here, distinguished commissioners, Mr. Alvarez, Mr. Garza, and the city of Pharr. Thank you very much for all your efforts and cooperation. The Historical Commission, and just want to say that this has been with us for 50 years. We've never forgotten. We've always been reminded of the pain and suffering that was happening 50 years ago to us, the Hispanics. And because of what happened 50 years ago here at this location, we are now reaping the benefits. As I look around, and mainly most of the cities and not all the cities, we have Hispanic mayors, we have commissioners, distinguished guests, and all that was a predecessor to where we are today. Once again, I want to thank you, and I want to introduce Mr. Thomas Ray Garcia. He's the one who was responsible for 3 years of hard work to get the plaque here so he can say a few words.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Thomas Ray Garcia. I'm just an ordinary Pharr resident. I was born and raised here, and back in 2015, on one of the many trips I made down Cage Boulevard, I looked at the Ramos Hairstyling Center and I saw that bench that is here. And back then, it was actually less debilitated. It said these words, "Resident Power AF." And one day I decided, you know what? I'm going to find out what that means. What does that mean? What happened here? And in 2015, that's what started a long journey of increased consciousness. What happened here, what happened in the student walkouts, what happened in the farm worker protests, and raising awareness and increased consciousness of the racism that my grandfather and mother went through growing up Mexican here in the 50s and 60s. And my motivation behind applying to this historical marker project back in 2017 was born out of that desire to have other people, especially young people, feel like their life in the present can be more informed and made more meaningful by that recognition that the past matters, that the past 50 years ago informs so much of what we do today. I have a couple of people I'd like to thank because this project started out as a very lonely venture, but along the way I met so many amazing people. The Ramos family have supported this project throughout the entire 4 years, and they were gracious enough to give me some speaking time today. The Alfonso Flores family couldn't be here today. It was an amazing experience to connect with them and meet with them, albeit virtually. And I hope that the historical marker text will honor his memory and his spirit. Originally, the marker text did not state that Alfonso was shot and killed by a police officer. I'd like to thank Dr. Kenneth Fletcher, may he rest in peace, for encouraging me not to give up in that fight to make sure that text was 100% correct. And that is why now the historical marker text does state that Alfonso Flores was shot and killed by a police officer. In some of the last words he emailed me, Dr. Fletcher said, "Delays are temporary, text is forever." And he spelled forever with a PH. And lastly, I'd like to thank the 38 donors who made this marker possible. The long story short is that there was a lot of bureaucratic issues with the marker initially, a confusion over who was going to pay for it. I was able to get an extension from the state to make sure this project didn't fall through the cracks. And 38 donors from across the valley, including Los Angeles and Princeton, New Jersey, donated within a week and a half to make this happen. So there was a lot of people along the way I met who expressed extreme interest and passion in what happened here 50 years ago today. So it's not just a City of Pharr event, but I truly think there's a lot of eyes across the country looking at what happened here today and learning from it. On a final note, I'd like to share that my own personal experience, feeling like my work, play, and life was overall made more meaningful by what happened here today. The next step is the hard part. I think the first step sounded a little hard. Getting the marker here, getting it unveiled today, it took some time. But in my opinion, I think the hard's really what we all do next. Marker's going to get unveiled today, but then the question is, what now? And it's a question I often used to pose to my former high school students. You have this knowledge, what are you going to do with it? And I hope that each of us in our own unique ways, starting today, can take awareness of what here today and move forward in our own unique ways, knowing that the past informs the present, and together we can make a better and more equitable and more just future here in the Rio Grande Valley together. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Hi, I would like to thank everybody once again, his hard work as well for Thomas doing all this. Maybe some of you don't realize that my father, Stanley Ramos, used to hold all meetings here to try to get this event, this historical thing going. He wanted Mexican Americans to be recognized. He did hard work. A lot of people were against those meetings. However, he said one day this will all come to life, and I feel now in his memory, as well as all the memories that passed away during this 50 years, he would be very proud, as we are, to acknowledge all this happening and making it historical. Means especially to the family. And I would like to thank all of you for your effort and your participation. Thank you.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and unveil. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, and 3. And for y'all that can't see it on that side, y'all can come over and see it on this side. But it reads, the Pharr Riot on February 6th, a small group gathered outside of the Pharr Police Department to protest. And it has a beautiful saying. One, two, and 3.